guys, thanks for checking out another one of my videos. I know it's been a little bit since I posted a video. I have been doing a little bit more of write-ups and things like that from my past couple games, but this one kind of was trying out something new, so I thought it would be a good thing to talk about. So I'll talk a little bit about the game, and then most of the discussion will actually focus on the list that I was playing, because that's a little bit more of what I'm interested in, and probably what's a little bit more interesting, period. So the game was really fun. I always like playing against Ultramarines. They're pretty good, even if you don't super optimize them, just because Gilliman is such like a powerful character. I know some people have been disagreeing with me about that, but I still think he's one of the more problematic models in the game from like a balance perspective. I think some of that's being a little overshadowed by the really cheap screens and stuff like that right now, but as those get taken care of, I would expect models like Gilliman to kind of show their actual dominance. But in any case, the list that I played against was very similar to the one I played against in the tournament. As I mentioned, me and Rob actually went out to dinner after that tournament with some other people, and we talked about the list. That kind of led to him dropping the Dreadnought. He also told me that we played this game that he was underpricing the Dreadnought, so he paid a little bit less for it than he should have. I think he said it was like by 30 points or something, just because of a Battle Scribe error. You do have to watch Battle Scribe because it's all community set up and very oftentimes wrong. Like for example, the Gargantuan Squigoths are horribly incorrect on Battle Scribe and have been for like a month. Anyways, I like the new build that he was rolling a lot better. I think aggressors are a much better unit to put in a repulsor than intercessors are, or anything else like that, because they're pretty slow and they're pretty short ranged and their armor isn't great. I was actually sure that they had a 2+ save, but apparently they only have a 3+ save. So getting them close and then getting them into combat as well is very good, because they have power fists and flamers, both very close range weapons. So I thought that was a good combination. Still not sure if I love the big unit of intercessors. Um, I'm assuming he just had some points, so it's like, let's get 3 more bodies in there. But I think you could move some things around and get that fixed. The captain could probably turn into something more useful. I assume he's in there because I think there was a battalion ran, because he had 3 troop and 2 HQs, because Gilliman is a Lord of War. But I think there's probably more useful HQs you could get, like a lieutenant. Is a lieutenant an HQ? I think he's an HQ. If not, then ignore me. But like a lieutenant would be useful. Another psyker would be useful, just because being able to deny like multiple abilities, or a lot of psychic abilities per turn, is actually really good right now, especially if you're playing an all Primaris list, because Smite is such a problem. Just some things like that I think could be moved around a little bit, and you could get some more power out of the list. But all in all, it's a good Primaris army for Ultramarines. I think Ultramarines run Primaris pretty well. Salamanders probably are better if you take all of the like little shenanigan stuff. They have the Forge World Apothecary, who brings guys back on a 3+. That's really good with Primaris, obviously. Their trait, or their chapter tactic, is really good, because it's kind of like a soft Gilliman, but obviously you get it for free, so you can bring some more bodies, just stuff like that. So definitely a solid choice as chapter if you're going to go that way. The game was really fun. It went by very quickly. We both had very few models, and we weren't, like getting into long combats or anything like that. It was pretty quick and brutal. I'm just shooting at high priority targets. He's shooting at my big guys. Things move very quickly, which was kind of a far cry from what I'm used to, where my turns just take a long time, because I have to move all these guys, then I have to resolve all these shots, then I have to do charges, resolve a bunch of attacks, stuff like that, and it really kind of bogs the speed of the game down. So it was fun to have a game that was set up quickly and it moved quickly. It was just a good change of pace from what I'm more used to. Even my Tau army takes a little while to play. It does have a lot of MSU. It has a lot of little positioning things that I have to do. Deep striking it on turn 1 takes forever, because I have to grab all the guys and kind of measure all this stuff out and pay attention to all that. So this is a little more carefree, and that was good. The game had several turning points. Me not going first was a big drawback. I did only have the +1, so it's not guaranteed or anything, but had I gone first, I would have been able to shoot the repulsor before it ever got to do anything to me, and then do, maybe some wounds to the Storm Talon, or even if I did no wounds to the Storm Talon, I wouldn't have taken as much damage on my Squigoth to start with, so that would have been a pretty big game changer. But then obviously I had a massive swing of luck when not only did I get a really good charge with the Squigoth that like finished off a couple units, but also killed Gilliman, and he didn't come back to life. So I mean, at that point I was kind of like, I can't sit back and shoot all game because I'm going to lose on Maelstrom, and I probably won't be able to like table him until maybe like turn 7 or something like that, if even then. So I'm just going to go in and we'll see what happens. And it just kind of luck went my way on that. So that's not something I would normally want to do, but I was definitely testing out the capabilities of the list and wanted to see what the Squigoth could do in combat and stuff. So and then the dice just kind of fell my way. Yeah, those were definitely the two big turning points. Once Gilman dies, his army is much worse without him, especially on all Primaris army where there's like not that many guys. So he is very resilient, but because I was able to put mortal wounds into him, that's definitely his bane. And then once he was gone, no more getting command points back, lost all the rerolls and everything. So the army just really goes downhill from there. So definitely a good fun game. And a good way to test out the list against a pretty balanced army. Probably could have had more anti-tank. That's something that Primaris really struggle with. They don't have very many anti-tank units. They have Hellblasters, which are okay at best. They're a little bit better with all the rerolls, but Rob was overcharging them every time, as he should. But they're still not anything great. And then he had a couple las cannons, a couple missile launchers, stuff like that, and so it wasn't as good as a like an Imperial Soup army or something like that, where they're going to have a lot more plasma and just a lot more bodies and things like that for me to chew through. So, but it was definitely a good test for me to just get used to the list and like how it played and what it needs and stuff like that. So we'll move on to the list, which is most of what I'm going to talk about. Before I get into the nuts and bolts of it, I think it's important to talk about why I decided to play a list like this. So right now, a lot of people that play 40k, especially if you're competitively minded, are focusing on taking out infantry because obviously it's pretty well known that like conscripts are really powerful. Brimstone Horrors are really powerful, cultists are powerful. A lot of people are playing like a lot of Marines, which get kind of swept up in the net of anti-infantry. Orcs are kind of right there as far as like a tier 2 army. They usually bring a lot of bodies, so by going anti-infantry you can sweep up all that stuff in the same net, and then you have a really good chance of doing well. If you look at the list that did well at the Nova Open, they're running like a lot of mortars, a lot of heavy bolters, just a lot of like generic infantry, so they can they have like strength 3, strength 4 shooting in abundance, stuff like that, and all of that makes it so that my my usual orc army, which is 180 bodies plus characters and stuff, is not as strong because it's going to get gunned down a lot faster than it would if I was facing a more like balanced army, or people were more afraid of tanks. The army really shines when people are afraid of tanks, but right now there's no good like tank or monster-based armies. That's just not really a thing. Hopefully, when Tyranids come out, that'll kind of maybe shove it a little bit that way. But right now, infantry is just so dominant that people aren't investing heavily in like meltaguns or las cannons or lances. All those are kind of equivalent things. They're really gearing up to kill infantry. So I was like, okay, I need something that's going to kind of counter that, because my whole thing with orcs was I want to have a very focused list in terms of only presenting one type of threat, and that was infantry. And I want to do the same thing, but I want to go the other way because people aren't running much anti-tank, so I want to run stuff that really abuses that. The problem with that is that orcs don't have very many good vehicles. Trucks are really bad, in my opinion. they don't hold enough guys to do anything of value. They die pretty easily. They don't have any worthwhile shooting, of course. They're like pretty much the same as a Rhino, but the cargo they carry is less important because, you know, like 12 orcs is not as good as 10 marines. It's just how it is. Battle wagons, pretty much the same thing. No good guns. They're best when you don't give them any guns, really. And then they're either toughness 7, which is not a good place to be, especially against plasma and things like that. And then you could shoot out of them, or they're toughness 8, but then you have to put melee units in them. And then with the nerf to them in the FAQ, where even if you move them, the guys inside also count as moving, they got a lot worse. So they're not really a great option. Most of the Forge World stuff isn't that great, either overcosted or it just doesn't have a great roll, anything like that. So Gargantuan Swigoths are kind of one of the default options. If you're unfamiliar with them, they're really good in combat. They have 8 attacks. Their default profile makes them hit on 3s, and they're strength 12, doing d6 damage at a minus. I'm pretty sure it's a minus 4 AP. I don't have the book right in front of me. So they'll cleave through pretty much anything. They do tons of damage. So they're really good at killing characters, really good at killing like monsters, vehicles, all that stuff. And then they have enough attacks to be decent against hordes, which is a good place to be. They also, on a 2+, do d6 mortal wounds to anything that they charge. So because the model is so big, you can often charge like 2, 3, 4 units and then do mortal wounds to all of them with good likelihood, and that's really powerful against like more elite targets. If people leave characters out, like you saw in the game, they can get sniped really easily, so you can do some really cool things with them, especially if you get a decent charge roll. Would be nice if they had Here We Go so that you could reroll those, but with command points it's not as bad because you're only going to be charging with like 1 or 2 of them a turn, obviously, because you're not taking a whole bunch of these 400+ point models. Their shooting is not so good, but as I was playing, I found out that it's not as bad as I thought. So their guns are horribly overpriced, except for Big Zappas. Like Big Zappas they're probably still too overpriced. They could probably lose like 3 points or something like that. Not much, but that was the gun I gave them just to make them as cheap as possible. And it's probably their best gun. The Labo would be good if it was like significantly cheaper, but the fact that it gets 2d3 shots because you get 2 of them kind of makes up for hitting on 5s or 6s, and then they do really good damage and they have really good AP. The problem is that they have variable strength, so they're not great at killing vehicles, but they're really good at killing like Terminators and things like that, which is good because then it frees up your tank busters to go after the other stuff, you know, like actual monsters and vehicles and, you know, things like that. The problem is that when they move, they hit on 6s, so that's really bad. It would be nice if they ignored that, but they don't. So, but one of the things I found out is that you can actually play a really good shooting army with the type of list that I have, where you don't have to move, and then the Squigoths can hit on a decent number. The tank busters hit on 5s, even if he moves or not. It just matters if he advances. And then you can have a pretty good shooting army against some builds. It depends on what your opponent has, obviously. So that's something that I would probably try if I played a similar list to what I played this time again. So something either like marine focused or more tanks or something like that. Just play a really big gun line and then, you know, come at me, and then if they do, then the Squigoths have a really good threat range and they're really good in melee, so you have a nice counter punch, which a lot of gunline armies don't have, especially with their kind of range, because Squigoths are speed 10 and then, you know, whatever the charge is. So not every army has that, and that's kind of a cool tool to have. The other thing that I wanted to try, which I took in this game, is the Kill Tank. It's pretty cheap for a Lord of War, and I wanted a third one to get the 3 command points. But its shooting is a little not so great. It has good anti-infantry shooting, but not amazing. Orcs are always like lacking in AP or number of shots or to hit rolls or something like that. It's just very frustrating to try to make orc guns work. But anyways, so I kind of took it as a way to have like a very focused anti-infantry piece, because not only are its guns anti-infantry, but the burnaboys inside are also anti-infantry, and it has a rule where guys inside of it can only hit on 6s. I don't remember if it's all the time or just when it moves, but Burna Boys obviously ignore that because they auto hit because they have flamers, so they're like the natural choice to put inside of that, other than like a melee unit or something. I was really impressed with the Burna Boys, but I didn't like the kill tank at all. It's too unfocused of a piece, so it has like some shooting, which is fine, um, but then it also has like melee-based rules, but it sucks in melee because it has a lot of attacks and it has good weapon skill, but it doesn't do multiple damage and it has no AP. So the fact that it has like a high strength and a lot of attacks is sort of wasted unless it's attacking like things with bad armor saves, which is okay because again it's built to kill infantry, but because it can't back out of combat and still shoot, or doesn't allow the guys inside of it to shoot out of combat or anything like that, like the Swigoth does, if it gets charged, it's pretty much useless because you either have to bail it out somehow, which can be a little bit hard when you're playing such an elite focus list, or you have to fall back with it and then it doesn't do anything that turn, which is really bad. Sometimes the guys inside have to get out so that it can fall back, and then they flame the people that are standing there, but then the Burna Boys are in the open and they're not tough or anything, like they're just regular orcs, but they're more expensive. So when I was theorying the list, I thought they were a little awkward, and they definitely played that way in the game. So yeah, like the kill tank got charged, I couldn't do a lot with it. It didn't have much of an impact on the game. The Burna Boys got out to try to do some more damage. They got instantly killed. So I was like, oh, this isn't working the way I want it to. So that's definitely something I was thinking about revisiting as soon as I was done with that game. But yeah, that's where my head was at, and why I built the list is I wanted something very low deployments so I can get a good chance of going first, and very kind of counter to the meta where I would be able to identify, okay, they have these few units that are really good at taking out vehicles or high toughness stuff. I'm going to dump my attacks into that, and then when I remove those things, a lot of other stuff is going to be wounding on 5s and 6s, and it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to do meaningful damage to me. And then from there I can kind of coast to a win, and that's what happened in this game. I did take some more damage than I was hoping to in the game that I played, just because my dice were not rolling armor saves well, but that's going to happen. So, but overall the plan did work. Where I'd like to go with the list is drop the kill tank package, because like I said, I wasn't very impressed with it, and get some more useful pieces. So what I'm going to experiment with next is actually a very similar list. So I'll just read it off here. I have 2 big mechs. They are not on bikes, they're just on foot, and they have custom force fields. So each of these are going to go 1 in each Swigoth, so that way the Swigoth will have just a 5++ as it's moving around. The rest of my army won't, but that's not super important, and that way the big mechs also can't be picked off, so it's very difficult for me to give up like Slay the Warlord. I'm not vulnerable to snipers really. Those are kind of small things that are pretty awesome actually. So yeah, I have 2 big mechs with that. Obviously the 2 Swigoths, they have 2 big Zappas and the 2 Twin Link big shooters, and like their teeth or whatever it's called, their horns they had to pay for. That's kind of the core of the army. I have 1 Weird Boy with the jump as my other HQ. I have the tank bustas, but I've split them up. That's a very obvious improvement for the army, is splitting the tank bustas up into smaller groups. As long as I have the elite slots for them, that lets you get extra knobs, which means you get extra wounds and extra attacks, and then it will also let you split your attacks more effectively. So instead of I have a unit of 15, I have to decide where all 15 rockets go whenever I activate them. I have 5 guys, so okay, I'll shoot 5 rockets at this vehicle. Oh, I rolled super hot and I blew it up. I don't have to waste any more shots on it. Or like, oh, I rolled super cold. Now I need to allocate some more shots to it. Things like that. So it's actually 4 units of 5 tank bustas and then 1 unit of 10. So that still gives me the 30 that I had before, but they're more split up. And because they all go inside the Squigoth, it doesn't cost me any more deployments or anything like that, which is awesome. It also makes me a little bit more resilient too if the Squigoths die, because I'm rolling smaller batches of dice, and then if I get ones, I can put them onto the knobs instead of the guys. So it means that I'll lose less guys immediately, which is a small thing, but it's pretty good. My 6th elite slot is a unit of 5 commandos with 2 burners and a knob. So these guys are in here for a couple reasons. One is they can stay in reserve for very few points. They're only 45 points for 5 guys. They can stay in reserves until turn 3, and then they can be like a late game scenario piece or something like that. But they can also come out early, and then they can, charge like some artillery or charge like a big gun unit. Like if my opponent has a Devastator squad with some las cans or something like that, they can get in there and try to tie those guys up and just make it so that my army's not getting shot by those big guns, which I'm actually afraid of. So those are all the elites. I have the 2 Swigoths, like I mentioned, and then rounding out the list is 2 units of 30 boys. They both have all shooters and a knob. Nothing special in there, like just how I usually run them, super vanilla. These guys are in the list to be to jump targets. So basically, they allow me to like apply pressure to different areas of the board. It helps me get through screens because shooters are really good against like conscripts and brimstone and stuff like that. So that kind of replaces that Burna Boys package. It gives me a little bit more range than the Burna Boys have. Obviously they were in a vehicle, so they were more safe and they could move around a little bit faster, but this, it's kind of a trade-off. And then it also gives me a lot more melee presence. That was something I was definitely missing in the game I was playing. I was like, oh man, I just have like so little ability to like charge things and to be in different places on the board and stuff because I had so few models. So I can run these guys around. I can deep strike them if I need to, and I can use them really effectively. They're kind of unsupported. Like they're not going to have a custom force field all the time. Although I can certainly start one of the big mechs on the board and then jump him in the Swigoth before it moves. So they'll probably hang out like in the back most of the time, out of range of most like 24-inch guns and stuff like that. And then I can kind of deep strike them as I go. Stuff like that. And then the 3rd troop is just a 10-man unit of Gretchen. Those are just my objective holders. They do have OBSEC when you're playing in ITC, and then they'll have OBSEC for every variant as soon as Chapter Approved comes out in a couple months. So they're just like a really cheap way to hold objectives. Something else I was a little worried about with the initial build is didn't really have any OBSEC and didn't have many ways to do objectives well. I was going to have to use the big mechs a lot for that, but that can kind of leave them exposed if my opponent has like fast stuff. So it would probably cost me sooner rather than later. So I wanted to have more dedicated units for that. Having a bunch of troops also gives me some screens against like scary charges and things like that. So if my opponent's playing like Grey Knights or something, I can kind of bubble wrap the Squigoths and prevent them from getting charged by like the the Paladin deep striking with the Grandmaster package where he gives them like reroll charges, stuff like that. So it's just a little bit more tactically flexible as well. And then having the Weird Boy not only allows me to deep strike the guys, but it gives me Deny the Witch, which is really important. Like most armies have like 1 or 2 psychic powers that are really important for them to go off. So like Magnus has the +1 invulnerable save spell. Nurgle has the -1 to hit. Tyranids have the 5-up feel no pain. Like that's just something that's becoming very common, and it's going to get more and more common as the codexes come out. Obviously not with AdMech coming out soon, but psychic powers are just pretty prevalent, and most armies have access to them. And then having access to a smite if you need it is not the worst thing. I still have enough guys to pump up the casting value a little bit and get d6 mortal wounds out of it, so it's kind of like a break glass in case of emergency thing, especially if the the Squigoth is tangling with a certain thing. I think having mortal wounds in a list is extremely important right now, just for dealing with some of the bigger models like Magnus, like Gilliman, like Paladins, those really resilient things that are fairly common right now. So it's definitely not something that I would ever scoff at having. So it's a little less focused than my original list was. It's not all toughness 8 guys riding around inside of transports presenting one type of target, but it's still 2 really big threats that have a lot of tank busters in them, which is kind of the heart of the army, and then very flexible boys units that can either, like I said, hang back on like my deployment edge and like wait out the battle a little bit. Until like the Squigoths get in there, or they can be thrown across the board to try to like open up holes and screens for the Squigoths, or charge some shooting units, stuff like that. So I think having them is definitely a bonus to the army, so I'm pretty glad to have them in there. I was also really missing having Deny the Witch. It feels really good to be able to interact with your opponent during the psychic phase. It's one of the things that's like really putting me off Tau. I would be very happy if Tau got something like Necrons, where they don't have offensive psychic abilities, but they at least have like a unit or a stratagem or something that can deal with psychic abilities, because I think if you just can't deal with the psychic phase, it's really difficult to build a powerful army if you don't have access to that. That's like one of the things that I think is a problem with like Dark Eldar, for example, is they just can't do anything about psychic powers, and they keep getting more and more powerful. So, but it's a different discussion. So yeah, that's the list I'll probably be trying out either this week or next week. I do have maybe a game this week, and then I'll definitely have a game next week because of the ladder league that I was talking about. I'm still definitely proxying this army. So as far as like the models go, I plan to use 2 Bane Blades for the Squigoths. They don't have the correct profile, but if you put something on like the front, then it measures out to the range that you need, and then you just have to make them taller, so that's not that hard. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. So hopefully I'll get another game in and I'll get to test the list a little bit more. And if anybody has any questions about it or wants to talk about it or anything like that, I'm definitely all for that. So thanks for checking out my video, and see you guys next time.